This is Gradowski. We are Change the Dark here in Washington, D.C. here in yet another episode of Problem Reaction Solution. Today with Ford Fisher of News to Share. By the way, it's his birthday. He already got his birthday punches. Ford, you've been doing a lot of incredible work out there on the ground, from Charlottesville, from Paris. Like, you've been in some of the most crazy, chaotic areas. From your work, what is the biggest problem out there that society has to face?
Yeah, so I mean, there are definitely many of them, but the one that I try to solve is that I think generally the government needs to be more accountable, right? People have all these different ideas about the government needs to be doing more of this, less of that. They have a problem doing this, they've got to stop doing this, they've got to start doing that, whatever. And I think that all of that kind of problem solving can only happen if you know what the government is doing in the first place. And so there are a lot of different ways that you can fight for government transparency, but my particular way, as someone who covers street activism, who covers things on the street, riots, protests, whatever, is I like to film cops. I like to film how the cops are treating people, how they respond to certain situations. Doesn't mean that I think they're necessarily doing something wrong, but I think that kind of accountability is how we start with truth. You can't reform something if you don't know how the thing is. So I like to film police, understand their kind of tactics, understand the way that they treat people, the way that they talk to people. I think that that's an important resource both for history and news, and to people who think that something needs to change. They've got to see it to begin with.
What are some of the reactions to this problem?
Well, I mean, to some extent, I think police can sometimes be agitated by being filmed, and some people think that you might mean poorly by wanting to do that, that you might have something against somebody who you are filming. But it's in public. You have your First Amendment right to do it. I'm dressed like a total nerd because I was speaking at a conference today about this exact subject. I gave a speech about this to a crowd mostly kind of from the Trump crowd, right? That was some red ball caps in the audience, some MAGA type people, but I was trying to tell them, this is your constitutional right. And if you guys are conservatives, if you're constitutionalists, then it should be important to you. And I think that there's obviously it crosses the political spectrum. Nobody's political ideology should start with, we need less accountability, right? Everybody should want to know what their government's up to.
Yeah, people always try to square you off as either left-wing Antifa or like right-wing nationalist. So you're like, your political kind of ideas are kind of still like unknown, at least to me, because I see a lot of chatter out there. But before we get into any of that, your solution is filming the police, obviously?
Yeah, so I mean, the way that I do it is that I like to film the police. I especially like to live stream the police, because then you're seeing the thing as it happens proves that you are not trying to manipulate it. Today, when I gave this speech, there was one lady who rose her hand who had a problem with what I had. Some other people rose their hands with questions that were interesting, but one person disagreed with me, and she said, well, the problem I have with the people who film the police is they only show the bad stuff that the police do. And I said, well, but that's a problem of their selective filming or their selective editing of what they put out. If something is live, you don't know what's going to happen. And so it's inherently honest by the very nature of the medium. It doesn't matter if the person live streaming is left, right, up, down, authoritarian, not authoritarian, whatever the thing is, footage is footage, and the less subjective it is, right? If you just take a picture, it's just a moment in time. If you just write something, you could be lying, right? If it's just video, maybe it's edited, manipulated, whatever. When it's live, it's live. That's the thing that happened, and it's indisputable. And so with the police being the enforcement arm of the state, I think that for me, that's the ground level way to do it. But anybody who has any other way to hold people accountable, if you're the kind of person who can research who's donating to who to affect how they vote, anything like that, I think any kind of government accountability, exposure to the state is something that is a really valuable thing to do.
I would argue with that older lady. I'm like, no, lady, nuh-uh. You're wrong. Because it all depends. It depends on who's doing the reporting. Obviously, there's a lot of biased people who are independent, who are also mainstream media. It all depends on the individual, but obviously the video never lies, and that's why it's important to always document everything. Usually, I always have a book bag. I always have a police camera on my shoulder, always ready to go. I always have one phone, second phone, different camera, because I've been through certain instances. But I would disagree with her mainly because when a cop does something outstanding, like give a homeless person a pair of shoes or take care of a homeless person, those stories go viral and they're great. There are some really top-notch, amazing officers who are incredible individuals who go out of their way to help individuals, but there's also a lot of bad officers that don't get held accountable. Like the police chief who robbed a bank, who was given probation and never went to jail, who robbed the bank after, again, twice. And there's so many instances in case by case of cops selling drugs or raping people and again, just getting away scot-free because they're police officers. Those things do happen. I was beat up by the police when I was a teenager. I had police officers arrest me on their false pretenses, sent me to jail, interrogate me, beat me up, threaten a fake bomb threat because they didn't like me and my free speech. Literally, all of this on this YouTube channel. The first video, cop walks up to me. He's like, I don't like you. Get out of here. I'm like, no. Started filming him. He's like, you're a terrorist. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, your book bags have cables coming out of them. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. I was like, you're lying. He's like, yeah, I am. I don't care. They'll put you in the hole for 30 days before anyone finds out. I filmed it. He got fired, or at least demoted from what I heard. But again, that's one instance where the police were held accountable with, video footage. My video footage, as probably as well as your video footage, was probably used in courts of laws. Let's get into that a little bit, because my footage was used many times in a court of law with the police saying, this guy came out and just started punching the cops for no reason. I was there. The guy was peacefully standing. Cops came up to him and beat him up. Totally different story. Court of law. Saw the video and was like, yeah, cops, you're lying. And if it wasn't for that video, the guy would have been in major trouble. Sorry, you've been wanting to talk, and I'm like...
So I had a really specific case that I used in this speech today that I think it really highlights the need for civilians to film the police. There's a situation that happened in Baltimore in early 2017 where basically a police officer arrested somebody and said, I found drugs next to his house, so I arrested him, right? And it takes 6 months, during which this guy couldn't afford the $50,000 bail. So the guy sits in jail for 6 months until... lawyers get a hold of the body camera footage. The cop inadvertently, the body cameras in Baltimore actually film for 30 seconds before you press the record button. So this cop presses the record button and then walks over to where there are drugs, looks around, and then he finds some drugs. Wow, look at that. But the thing that the cop didn't realize is that he recorded the 30 seconds before that situation. And in those 30 seconds, he has a bag of drugs, he puts them down, and then he walks away. And then he turns the camera on, and then he looks. He's like, "Let's go look over here, guys!" Right? And then he finds them, in quotes, right? So the person was immediately exonerated when that footage came out. But he did 6 months in jail, right? He wasted, what could end up being, 0.5% of his entire lifespan in jail over this. And the cop was ultimately found guilty. However, the cop claimed, well, I actually found the drugs, but I had forgotten to turn my body camera on, so that's why I put them back and then turned my body camera on, and I was recreating the scene of finding them. So that was his excuse. Maybe it's true. I don't know. But if there had been civilian-controlled footage of that entire situation, right, then you would have known what happened. And if it hadn't been for the inadvertently caught video, then we still would never know, right? We would have never found out about this. So I use this case as an example of why it is important to film them, because you don't know when the thing is going to matter. Like you mentioned Charlottesville, right? So my footage was used in the prosecution of James Alex Fields, who killed somebody in Charlottesville. He drove by me while I was live streaming 6 minutes before the attack happened. Totally peaceful, just a road like behind us, right? He drove past me, and that ended up mattering because it showed his position and his direction 6 minutes before the attack. So when you're in a situation that, especially that the police are involved in, or if you just come across somebody who's being detained by the police or whatever, if you're able to, just film that situation. It doesn't mean you have to get involved. It doesn't mean you have to be reacting. Just film it the way that it's happening. Live stream it if you can. And every now and again, nothing will happen, right? I had one time actually recently that there was a guy who was in some kind of a fight, and I was walking by and he was being handcuffed and they were waiting for a van to load him in, and I just sort of started recording and filmed this situation until he ended up in the van, and there was no particular problem. The cop was kind of making fun of me because I was filming it. He's like, "Oh, look at you! You see a black guy getting, arrested, and you just start filming. Oh, you must hate us, blah blah blah." And when he finally loaded the guy into the van, what he said to me, he goes, "Sorry, it was so boring and you couldn't sell it." And the words that came out of my mouth were, I actually said this to him. I was like, "I filmed it so you'd make it boring," right? People sometimes behave better because they're being filmed. Your government will act better if it knows that it can be held accountable. So culturally, these things change when people realize that they'll be held accountable.
I don't believe in government, but I think all the politicians should be live streamed, drug tested, berated by people. Even once a month, throw a tomato at their heads. In an annual tomato throw, whatever. That's my own
Every
part.
single politician in every office in the country should have to face Luke once a week for his determination. He gets to harass them as much as he wants to.
I was actually thinking about running for political office just for that very reason. I was like, I'm gonna run. I'm gonna live stream everything. I'm gonna just get kicked out of the Capitol as many times as I can.
Kicked out of your own office.
Yeah, that was gonna be the main goal. Maybe it could happen. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Last thing I want to kind of leave it off. If you are filming the cops, be respectful as much as you can. understand. These officers face a lot of crazy situations. They face a lot of trauma. That's why their behaviors are sometimes unpredictable. We have to come from a kind of understanding point of view, not from a hateful point of view. What's the word that I'm looking for here? Not a generous one, but an empathetic one. Always come from, cut me off if you think of anything else, that, like tips, but just always give them a little bit of distance.
I think it's just respect. Yeah. I mean, I honestly think that, whether I know you don't believe in that there should be any government or whatever, but honestly, if you just like anything else, you treat them with respect, they have a job that they're doing, and your job as a civilian is to hold them accountable if that's what you want your job to be, and anybody can do it. You can be respectful by doing that. It's not an act of disrespect to say, you are the state, you are representing me. In our theoretical democracy, you're theoretically representing me as you do this. Yeah. I have the right to observe to make sure that it goes well.
Yeah, I've been detained hundreds of times, usually confronting politicians or just filming protests. And again, give them a little bit of space. Don't rush on them. Don't curse. And whatever you do, don't like jump on your phone like, I'm gonna film you. Don't be a douche. Just chill out, relax.
It's like Chris Brown said, never run at the cops, but also never run away from the cops. And if you can avoid it, don't even run perpendicular to the cops.
Yeah, just don't run. It's
just
like
no running, because then it tweaks them all out.
Imagine you're like in a kindergarten, like just chill out. Talk to them like babies sometimes. Talk to everyone. It's okay. It's fine. Don't worry. Usually, I also have like a little strap thing on my book bag that I just like put my phone in. It just kind of lays there. Automatically films too, in case my backup police camera doesn't film. But yeah, Ford, thank you so much. Where can people find you, and your last things that you want to say?
Yeah. So my outlet is called News to Share. That's news, the number 2 share. I'm on Twitter at Ford Fisher, on Facebook Ford Fisher, and also News to Share. I have a YouTube channel called News to Share, and I'm also on Patreon, patreon.com/Ford Fisher. And yeah, thank you for watching me and Luke here.
Yeah, well, don't forget, you are a responsible person in our society, and our society is a representation of you. Happy birthday very much. Birthday punches will continue.
Those 4 punches.
Subscribe for more here on wearechange.org for more content.